Snow was falling like dust from a torn sky, layering the narrow streets in white silence. At the corner pharmacy, a small figure stood trembling beneath the flickering neon light. 7-year-old Nova Lane pressed her sketchbook against her chest. Her gloves were too thin, her fingers already stiff from the cold. Inside the glass door, the pharmacist Victor Haynes slammed a drawer shut. No money, no medicine. Come back when you can pay, he snapped. Nova's breath fogged the air. She whispered, "But my grandpa, he can't breathe again without it." Her words vanished into the wind. The man turned away. She stepped back into the snow, clutching a handful of hand-drawn cards. Tiny watercolor suns and crooked hearts. Each one said, "Get well soon, Grandpa." She tried to sell them to strangers rushing past, but no one stopped. A snowflake landed on her eyelashes and melted into tears. A car horn echoed in the distance, muffled by the storm. Before we go any further, take a breath with me. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? If your heart has ever felt cold or forgotten, you're not alone here. Sometimes we all need a reminder that kindness still exists, even in the cruelest storm. If your heart feels heavy, may this story bring you a little light. Now, let's begin. The wind howled through the empty street. Nova crouched beside the curb, her sketchbook damp her boots, half buried in snow. She whispered to herself, "If I sell 3 cards, I can buy the small bottle. Just 3. Her voice was almost gone. Across the street, the headlights of a Lucid Air slowed to a stop. From the driver's seat stepped a tall man in a dark coat, Caleb Arden, CEO of Arden Therapeutics. He had just left a board meeting about profit margins and patent costs. But the sight before him stopped him cold, a child sitting in the snow, her lips blue, holding drawings instead of money. Caleb walked closer. Snow crunched under his shoes. He took off his coat and wrapped it around her small shoulders. "No child should trade art for survival," he said quietly. Nova looked up. Her brown eyes reflected the streetlights like 2 tiny candles. Behind her, the sign of the pharmacy blinked. Red, Medistar. Open 24 hours, but the door was locked. The man looked at the trembling girl, then back at the frozen door, and something inside him, something he thought had died long ago, began to move again. The wind had quieted by dawn, leaving a pale stillness across the town. Beyond the frozen fields stood a small wooden house, its roof sagging beneath a thick blanket of snow. Inside, the air was cold but gentle scented, faintly of old pine and the smoke from a dying fire. A kettle clicked on the stove, though the flame beneath it had already faded. In the corner of the narrow room, Walter Lane sat in an old armchair wrapped in a quilt. His breathing came in short, uneven gasps. On the nightstand beside him lay a bottle of heart medicine, nearly empty. He reached for it with shaking hands, but the cough returned before his fingers could touch the cap. Across the room, Nova stirred from her sleep. Her blanket was patched and thin, the same one her mother had sewn before she passed. She rubbed her eyes, then hurried to her grandfather's side. "Don't try to get up, Grandpa," she said softly. "I'll bring you some warm water." Her voice was a whisper, but her movements were steady, used to caring for him alone. The walls of the small house were covered with hand-drawn cards, smiling suns, snowmen, crooked hearts, and bright yellow flowers. Each one carried a short message written in a child's careful handwriting, "You'll be okay." They were Nova's way of keeping hope alive, painting warmth onto walls that had forgotten what spring felt like. On the table by the window sat a small tin box. its surface scratched from years of use. Nova opened it slowly. Inside were a few coins, a folded bus ticket, and one photograph, her mother's smile frozen in time. She added the coins she had earned from selling cards yesterday, 25 cents. Her little hand hovered over the total, counting, in a whisper, $2.15. Her eyes flickered toward the empty medicine bottle. She needed $5 more. Outside, the snow started falling again, soft, relentless, endless. She picked up her colored pencils worn down to stubs and began to draw a new card. A bright red heart surrounded by a storm of white flakes. At the bottom she wrote, "Stay a little longer, Grandpa." When she was done, she held it up against the window light. The morning sun struggled to break through the grey sky, but for a brief second it glowed behind her, drawing and turning the paper into stained glass. Her lips curved into a small smile. "Maybe today someone will buy this one," she whispered. Behind her, Walter watched quietly, his eyes soft but heavy with worry. He didn't tell her that he hadn't eaten dinner the night before, or that every night he prayed the same prayer to hold on until spring returned. He simply reached out a trembling hand and brushed her hair away from her eyes. "You draw the sun, sweetheart," he said. "That's how you keep the cold away." Nova nodded, clutching her pencils tighter. Through the window, the world outside was white and endless, but inside the little wooden house, a fragile warmth was beginning to bloom. A warmth made not of fire, but of love, refusing to die. The snow hadn't stopped all morning. Downtown Seattle glimmered under its silver coat, the kind of beauty only the lonely ever noticed. Inside a high rise of glass and steel, Caleb. Arden, 42, sat in silence before the panoramic window. Behind him, his assistant spoke softly about stock reports and new investors, but the words blurred into static. Caleb's gaze was fixed on the storm outside. Each falling flake reminded him of another winter, the one when his daughter had slipped away in a hospital bed, a small hand growing colder in his grasp. The machines had beeped once, then stopped, and in that moment, so had he. He hadn't painted since that day. He hadn't laughed either. Every success afterward felt like a monument built over grief. The soft vibration of his phone broke the silence. A message blinked from the company board, approval new price model for heart medication. A 40% markup. Caleb stared at it, jaw tightening. 40% more for what? For breathing, he muttered. The assistant hesitated. "Sir, that's the market adjustment." He didn't answer. He closed the file, stood, and said quietly, "Cancel my next meeting. I need some air." Minutes later, his lucid air glided through the snow-clogged streets toward the city's edge. He didn't know where he was going, only that the glass towers behind him suddenly felt too small to hold his guilt. As he passed the old neighborhood pharmacy, a small figure caught his eye. A child kneeling in the snow, arms wrapped around a sketchbook, offering colorful drawings to strangers who didn't stop. The car slowed. Something inside him twisted. For a split second, he saw his daughter's face, the same defiance against pain, the same trembling lips. He opened the door before his driver could react. Snow bit into his cheeks as he crossed the street. The child looked up, startled. Her cheeks were flushed pink, her fingers blue, but her eyes, those brown luminous eyes, were still brave. Caleb took off his coat, placed it gently around her shoulders, and spoke with a voice that cracked from the cold and from memory. No child should trade art for survival. Nova blinked, unsure if he was real. Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time in years, Caleb felt something thaw inside him. A small, stubborn warmth pushing through the frost that had ruled his life too long. He didn't yet know her name, but he knew this. He couldn't just drive away. The next morning, the snow had turned to ice. The city looked beautiful from afar, silver pure, untouched. But at street level, the world was cruel and grey. Caleb Arden parked outside the same pharmacy where he had found Nova the night before. The sign, Medistar, open 24 hours, still blinked above the door, though half its letters were dark. He pushed it open, the small bell jingling above him. Behind the counter stood Victor Haynes, the man with the cold eyes and the perfect smile of someone who never apologized. His voice was slick. "Mr. Arden, quite an honor. Didn't expect the famous CEO to visit a neighborhood store." Caleb's tone was calm, but his stare sharp. "I'm here because a little girl came here yesterday. You turned her away." Victor smirked, polishing a shelf of pill bottles. "Oh, her cute kid. But charity isn't part of my business plan." Caleb stepped closer. She was trying to buy heart medication. Her grandfather could have died. Victor shrugged. And yet he didn't. "I sell medicine, not miracles." The words hit like ice. Caleb's jaw tightened. He picked up a bottle from the shelf and read the label, Arden Therapeutics, Lot RX207A. His own company's logo stared back at him like a mirror he didn't want to face. This batch, he said slowly, was meant for hospital distribution. It was never cleared for retail. Victor's smile faltered for the first time. "You must be mistaken. My supplier handles all the paperwork." Caleb's voice dropped. "Your supplier works for me." A flicker of panic crossed Victor's eyes. Then just as quickly it vanished, replaced by a cold grin. "Be careful, Mr. Arden. The higher you stand, the harder the fall." Caleb left without another word. The bell above the door jingled again, mocking hollow. Outside, the air felt sharper, the snow crunching like glass underfoot. He got into his car, silent. Nova sat in the backseat sketchbook on her lap. She had insisted on coming, thinking maybe the man would finally give her the medicine. When she saw Caleb's face, she knew. "He's still angry, isn't he?" she whispered. Caleb looked at her through the rear-view mirror. "Some people forget what kindness looks like," he said softly. "I used to be one of them." He drove her home, the snow thickening into a white curtain. As they reached the wooden house, Nova opened the door and ran to her grandfather's side. Caleb watched from the threshold. The little girl's small hands brushed the frost from Walter's blanket. She whispered something. He couldn't hear the words, but he could feel their warmth in the frozen air. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat by his office window, staring at the city lights reflected in the snow. The bottle he had taken from the pharmacy sat on his desk. He turned it over, and a thin crack in the seal caught the light proof of tampering. "So it's true," he murmured. "My medicine is being sold like poison." The wind outside howled against the glass. For the first time in years, Caleb didn't feel like the hero of his own story. He felt like the man who had built the storm. The following day, frost covered every window of the Arden headquarters. The city was frozen solid, the world moving slower than usual, except for Caleb Arden. He hadn't slept. The cracked bottle from Victor's pharmacy lay on his desk under the glow of a desk lamp. He kept turning it over and over, as if the truth might spill out if he stared long enough. On the cap was a faint scratch, barely visible, shaped like a small B-43 engraving. It wasn't a random mark. Every batch from his company carried a lot number burned into the seal, but this one didn't match the registry. He logged into the company's internal system, typed in the code, and frowned. The screen flashed, "No record found." The phone buzzed. His legal advisor, Avery Quinn, answered immediately. "Caleb, it's 6 a.m. You sound like you haven't slept." "I haven't," he replied. "I need your eyes on something. Bring the compliance files for our heart meds. All of them." There was a short pause, then Avery's calm but firm voice. "Something's wrong. Something's been wrong for a long time," he said quietly. By mid-morning, Avery arrived, her boots leaving a trail of melted snow across the marble floor. Caleb handed her the bottle. "This came from a Medistar pharmacy. The label's ours, but the batch code doesn't exist." Avery squinted at the mark. B43. "That's not one of ours. Someone's rerouting your products through an unregistered warehouse, which means Caleb said somebody inside is feeding them." They both turned toward the giant glass window overlooking the snow-covered city. Avery crossed her arms. "If you're right, you're talking about federal charges, supply, tampering, endangering lives." Caleb's reply came slow, steady. "Then let's make sure the next person who freezes out there doesn't die because of me." That afternoon, they drove back to the old neighborhood with Nova in the back seat. She had insisted on helping. In her small hands, she held a wrinkled receipt, one she had saved in her tin box since last week. "It's from the same store," she said. "Mr. Haynes gave this back when I tried to buy Grandpa's medicine." Caleb took it gently. The paper was smeared with rain, but a single barcode remained visible. He scanned it with his phone. The screen lit up, Distributor North Point Storage Facility, Tacoma. Status restricted. Avery raised an eyebrow. "That's not one of your warehouses." Caleb's voice hardened. "No, but it used to be." The next evening, snow whipped through the open gate of the North Point facility. The place was dark, except for a few pale lights flickering inside. Caleb and Avery entered with 2 investigators and a local journalist who owed Avery a favor. They stepped into the cold, metallic silence. Rows of boxes towered like tombstones. Some were labeled with legitimate product codes, others blank. Caleb brushed snow off one of them and read aloud, AR27A, RX27A, RX200C. All these are cloned labels. Avery's flashlight stopped on a spill of broken pill bottles near the back wall. She knelt, picking up a cracked cap. "Expired 2 years ago." Caleb's stomach tightened. "They've been reboxing them." From the corner of the warehouse came the faint sound of a door slamming shut. A figure stepped out, Maya Torres, a young pharmacist in a faded winter coat. She froze when she saw them. "I knew someone would come," she said. "I used to work here. They made me sign false shipment reports. I quit last month." Avery moved closer. "Who gave the order?" Maya hesitated, her voice trembling. "Victor Haynes. And someone higher. He called him the ghost inside Arden." Caleb's eyes darkened. "An insider." Maya nodded. "Yes, someone from your corporate distribution chain." She pulled out a small drive from her pocket. "I kept a copy of the shipment data before I left. If this goes public, they'll come after me, but I can't stay silent anymore." Caleb took the drive, his hands steady despite the cold. "You did the right thing." As they stepped back into the storm, snowflakes swirled in the light from the car's headlights, like shards of glass scattering in the dark. Nova peered from the window, watching the adults move through the blizzard, her small voice barely audible through the glass. So, people are hurting, others to make money. Avery looked at her and smiled faintly, sadness in her eyes. Yes, sweetheart. But tonight, someone finally decided to stop them. The snow kept falling, and in that white silence, the first footprints toward justice were carved into the frozen ground. 3 days later, the city woke to headlines that burned hotter than the snow could cool. Millionaire CEO exploits sick child for publicity. Little girl's story. A PR stunt gone too far. Screens across Seattle flashed the same grainy footage. Nova standing in the snow outside the pharmacy, Caleb kneeling beside her. Only now, the footage was cut, rearranged, stripped of truth. A voiceover sneered. He used her to sell pity and his company's name. Victor Haynes watched the report play on a tablet in his office. A glass of whiskey reflecting the cold blue light. He smiled thinly. They'll eat him alive. At Arden headquarters, chaos spread like wildfire. Reporters swarmed the building, their microphones like bayonets. Employees whispered, investors panicked, and the board demanded an explanation. Caleb stood before them, shoulders squared, eyes hollow. I didn't stage anything, he said. That child Nova Lane was dying in the snow. I acted because I had to. One of the board members slammed a pen down. Intent doesn't matter. Optics do. Our stock dropped 8% overnight. Caleb exhaled slowly. If telling the truth costs me 8%, then the next lie might cost a life. The room fell silent. Outside, Nova sat by the window of her grandfather's room, watching the snow drift past. Walter had gotten his medicine now, thanks to Caleb's help, but the news on the old TV made her chest ache. The words fake and actor flashed again and again. She turned to her grandpa. They think I lied, Grandpa. Walter took her small hand, his eyes dim but steady. Truth doesn't melt, sweetheart. It just waits for the sun. That evening, Avery arrived at Caleb's office with a grim face. They've started a smear campaign. Dozens of fake accounts, old employees leaking doctored memos. They're trying to paint you as the villain who framed Haynes. Caleb rubbed his temples, fatigue weighing on every breath. Then we give them the real story. No press release, just truth. Avery blinked, meaning he looked up, fire slowly lighting behind his eyes. We go live. That night, as snow hammered the streets, Caleb stood in front of a small camera in his study. No lighting crew, no studio polish. Behind him, the cracked medicine bottle sat on his desk, illuminated by a single lamp. He spoke plainly, his voice rough from exhaustion. This isn't a press statement. This is a confession. I built a company that let greed slip in through the cracks. A little girl named Nova reminded me that medicine isn't a business, it's a promise. If that makes me a fool, I'll wear it proudly. He paused, looked directly into the lens. If profit needs pain, I'll choose loss. The live stream lasted 4 minutes. By midnight, it had reached 2 million views. People began leaving comments. We believe you. Protect that girl. Truth matters again. Meanwhile, in the shadows of his penthouse, Victor Haynes threw the glass against the wall. Crimson liquid streaked down like blood on ice. You think you can outshine me, Arden? Let's see how long your truth survives the storm. Outside, snow began to fall again, quiet, relentless, as if the heavens themselves refused to look away. The courthouse stood like a grey fortress against the blinding snow. By morning, crowds had already gathered outside, reporters, protesters, strangers, holding signs that read, "Justice for Nova and medicine for all." Cameras flashed as Caleb Arden stepped from the black car coat dusted in white. Beside him walked Avery Quinn, steady and unflinching, a briefcase clutched in her gloved hand. Behind them, a small figure followed Nova, wearing the same scarf she had used to sell her drawings, her fingers gripping her sketchbook tight. Inside the courtroom buzzed like a hive of whispers. On the opposite bench, Victor Haynes sat beside his lawyer, his smile sharp, his cufflinks gleaming. He leaned back, whispering to the man beside him, "Let's end this sympathy show." When the judge entered the room, fell silent. Avery stood first, her voice clear as glass. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that Mr. Haynes knowingly distributed expired medicine under falsified labels and used company networks to conceal financial gain." The defense laughed. Speculation and slander he shot back. The so-called evidence was stolen by an unlicensed whistleblower. Caleb sat motionless, hands clasped. His eyes found Nova's across the room. She gave him the faintest nod, tiny but enough. Avery called the first witness. Maya Torres stepped to the stand, nervous but resolute. She told the court everything: the forged signatures, the night she saw Haynes signing illegal transfers, the way she'd been threatened into silence. Then Avery presented the final piece, the digital log from Maya's drive. Projected on the screen, rows of fake shipment records filled the wall, each signed with Victor's initials. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Mr. Haynes, would you care to explain this?" Victor's face drained of color. He stammered forgery. "They made that file," but his voice cracked on the last word. The prosecutor stood. "We have confirmation from the Department of Health. Those codes match your warehouse entries. The chain of custody is clear." The room rippled with murmurs. Reporters scribbled, cameras clicked. Avery turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I have one final request." Her eyes softened as she looked toward Nova. "Permission to let the child speak for the record." The judge hesitated, then nodded. The clerk placed a small stool by the witness stand. Nova climbed up, barely reaching the microphone. The courtroom quieted until even the hum of the heating vents disappeared. Avery knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, you don't have to be afraid. Just tell the truth in your own words." Nova looked down at her mittened hands. Then she raised her gaze, her voice trembling but clear. "I didn't want to be on TV. I just wanted Grandpa to stay warm." Her words hung in the air, weightless and unstoppable. Even Victor stopped breathing. The judge's pen slipped from his fingers. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hiss of snow against the windows. A woman in the audience wiped her eyes, then another, and another. Caleb's hands shook on the table. He bowed his head, whispering something only he could hear. Outside, through the glass walls, the snow was still falling, but now it glowed faintly under a ray of pale sunlight. When the verdict came hours later, it was short and final. Guilty on all counts. Victor's face went grey. His lawyer slammed his folder shut. The bailiff led him away, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor. As the gavel struck, Nova turned to Caleb and whispered, "Does this mean Grandpa can stay now?" Caleb smiled faintly through tears. "Yes, Nova, it means he can stay." And as they stepped out into the falling snow, The crowd outside erupted, not in noise, but in applause so soft it sounded like the world exhaling relief. A week after the verdict, the snow finally began to melt. The streets of Seattle gleamed under a fragile sunlight that felt almost new, as if the whole city had been holding its breath and could finally exhale again. Inside a hospital ward on the east side, Walter Lane sat by the window, his skin still pale but his eyes alive, tracing the trails of melting frost on the glass. On the bedside table lay a small bouquet of hand-drawn cards. Nova's bright and clumsy, each one saying the same thing in different colours. "Thank you for staying." Nova sat cross-legged beside him, her sketchbook open. She was drawing again this time, not snow or hospitals, but sunlight spilling through clouds. Caleb Arden stood quietly near the doorway, watching the girl who had once shivered in a blizzard now paint warmth into existence. Walter looked up, smiling faintly. "You saved her," he said. Caleb shook his head. "She saved me first." That afternoon, the news broke Arden Therapeutics announces zero-profit medicine program. A white banner stretched across the company's headquarters. Medicine is not a privilege, it's a promise. Reporters called it revolutionary. Analysts called it financial suicide. But for the first time in years, Caleb didn't care about the numbers. He walked through the halls of his company greeting employees, who now met his eyes not with fear, but with respect. Every corner of the building smelled faintly of coffee and renewal. For once, the air felt human again. He stopped by his office window, where the skyline shimmered with melting snow. Below, volunteers carried boxes of free heart medicine to clinics across the city. Among them, a little girl in a red coat handed out her drawings: a sun, a heart, a house under a blue sky. Each card was slipped into a medicine box, like a secret blessing. That evening, Caleb drove to the Lanes' small wooden house. He knocked once and Nova opened the door, her face lighting up. "Mr. Caleb Grandpa says you're on TV again." He laughed softly. "I'd rather be here." He knelt beside her and handed over a new tin box, polished and shiny. "This is for your drawings," he said. "No more selling them in the snow." Nova opened it and gasped. Inside was a note in Caleb's handwriting. "Hope doesn't run out. Keep creating it." She hugged him tightly, her small arms barely reaching around his neck. And for the first time since that long winter night, Caleb felt truly warm. Outside, the snow had stopped completely. The world was dripping with light. And somewhere deep in the frozen city hearts that had gone cold began to thaw again. Winter had returned, but softer this time. The snow no longer felt cruel. It fell like forgiveness. The little wooden house on the hill glowed warmly beneath the pale sky. Inside, laughter filled the air, thin, joyful, fragile. Nova Lane now, 8, sat at the kitchen table teaching 2 neighborhood kids how to draw hope cards for the clinic. Each one carried a message in her careful handwriting. "Keep breathing. You matter. Love wins." Walter Lane sat nearby sipping tea, his once frail frame stronger now. He watched his granddaughter draw a sunrise over snow and whispered, "She paints like her mother." A gentle knock came at the door. Nova ran to open it. Caleb Arden stood there, snow dusting his coat, a smile softening his face. "Hey, little artist," he said. "Mr. Caleb," she grinned. "Come in, it's freezing." Inside, the air was thick with warmth and cinnamon. On the table sat the polished tin box Caleb had given her months before. It was full of new drawings, not ones she sold, but ones she gave away at the Curalight Center, where sick children left with both medicine and hope. Nova reached into the box and pulled out one card. It showed a man in a snowy street holding a child's hand beneath a glowing lamp. At the bottom, she'd written, "Sometimes the cure isn't in a pill, it's in a promise." Caleb's eyes glistened. "You drew this." She nodded proudly. "For you. Because you stopped." He smiled, voice breaking slightly. "Then I'll keep stopping for as many as I can." Outside, snowflakes drifted past the window, catching the warm glow from inside. The house looked like a lantern in the winter night, small, fragile, yet unshakably bright. Nova leaned against her grandfather's shoulder, Caleb watching in quiet peace as the girl began another drawing. The fire crackled. The world outside was white and endless, but in that tiny home, everything was finally warm. A soft voice closed the story. Even in the coldest world, one act of kindness can turn snow into light. No more dark, no more cold, just home. In the quiet ache of Nova, or in the choice to stand up like Caleb. Have you ever seen kindness appear right when the world felt cold? Maybe it was a small moment, a stranger's smile, a gentle word, a reminder that light can still reach through the storm. If someone like Nova crossed your path today, what would you do to ease her fear? Tell us in the comments, because even one line from you might guide someone lost in their own winter. And how have you been lately? Did this story warm you even for a heartbeat? If your day feels heavy, I hope this ending gave you a little light to hold on to. Thank you for watching, for feeling, for staying. Every view, every word you share keeps us going, so we can keep telling stories that heal, stories that whisper. No more dark, no more cold, just home.